I smiled as I signed the papers. My daughter Stephanie thought I was signing myself into a nursing home. I wasn't. The lawyer slid the documents across the polished mahogany table, and I picked up the pen with steady hands. Behind me, I could feel my daughter's presence, hovering, watching, probably congratulating herself on finally getting rid of the burden that was her mother. 3 months ago, that thought would have broken my heart. Today, it just made me tired. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a retired English teacher from Portland ended up sitting in a lawyer's office on the day before Christmas Eve, about to destroy her daughter's entire world. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 65 years old. I spent 37 years teaching high school English in Portland public schools, shaping young minds, grading papers until my eyes blurred, attending parent-teacher conferences, and genuinely loving every minute of it. When my husband David passed away 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I thought my world had ended. We'd been married for 38 years. We'd built a life together, raised our daughter Stephanie, saved for retirement, and planned to travel the world once I retired. Instead, I found myself alone at 57, grieving and trying to figure out what came next. Stephanie was wonderful during that first year. She called every day. She invited me to family dinners. She suggested I move closer to her and her husband Brad and their twin boys, Mason and Tyler, who were just turning 3 at the time. "Mom, we'd love to have you nearby," she said. "The boys need their grandma." And honestly, Brad and I could use the help. Childcare is so expensive in Portland. I'd just retired at 60 with a modest pension. My house in Eugene was paid off, but it felt too big, too empty, too full of memories. The idea of being close to my grandsons, of being useful again, of having family around, it was appealing, more than appealing. It felt like a lifeline. So when Stephanie called me 6 months later with a proposition, I listened. Mom, Brad, and I found the perfect house in Northeast Portland. It's close to the boys' school, close to Brad's startup office, close to everything. But it's a bit of a stretch financially. The thing is, it has a basement apartment, fully finished, separate entrance, little kitchenette. What if you sold your house and moved in with us? You could help with the down payment, and in return, you'd have a place to live, you'd be close to the boys, and we'd all be together as a family. She made it sound so reasonable, so mutually beneficial. I sold my house in Eugene for $385,000. The market was good, and David and I had bought it for $120,000 30 years earlier. After paying off the small remaining mortgage and settling everything, I walked away with $360,000. Stephanie and Brad's house in Portland cost $650,000. They had $100,000 saved, and I contributed $150,000 for the down payment. The agreement was that I owned a portion of the house proportional to my investment, roughly 23% of the equity. We had it all documented. I insisted on that. Maybe somewhere in my teacher's brain, I knew to protect myself, even from family. The basement apartment was nice enough. About 600 square feet, with a bedroom, bathroom, small living area, and a kitchenette with a mini fridge and microwave. It had its own entrance around the side of the house. "Your own space," Stephanie said, beaming as she showed me around before we closed on the house. "But you're part of the family, Mom. You'll have dinner with us, spend time with the boys. It'll be perfect." And for the first 2 years, it almost was. I babysat Mason and Tyler every day after school. I helped with homework, made them snacks, took them to the park. I paid for my own groceries, of course, and I quietly covered the electric bill and the internet because I noticed how stressed Stephanie seemed about money. Brad's startup, some kind of cryptocurrency trading platform he'd been working on for 5 years, wasn't exactly profitable yet, and Stephanie's job as a marketing coordinator paid decently but not enough to cover the lifestyle they'd gotten accustomed to. The boys were sweet at first. "Grandma, will you read us a story? Grandma, can we bake cookies? Grandma, watch what I can do." But as they got older, something shifted. Stephanie and Brad stopped disciplining them. When Mason threw his iPad across the room because I said he needed to finish his homework before playing games, Stephanie just sighed and said, "Mom, pick your battles. They're only kids." When Tyler called me annoying for asking him to put his dishes in the sink, Brad laughed and ruffled his hair. "That's my boy," speaks his mind. The respect eroded slowly, like the ocean wearing away at a cliff, subtle at first, then catastrophic. What my daughter and son-in-law didn't know, what I never told them because they never asked, was that I had another income stream. 6 months after David died, I was struggling. Not financially, exactly, but emotionally. I needed purpose. I needed to feel useful. One of my former students, who'd gone on to become a director at a large tech company in Portland, reached out to me. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "we're building a leadership development program. We need someone who can teach our executives how to communicate better, write better, think more clearly. Would you consider consulting for us?" I thought he was being kind, offering me a little project to keep me busy. I said yes. That consulting gig led to another. And another. Before I knew it, I was working remotely for 3 different companies, teaching workshops on communication, editing training materials, developing curriculum for corporate learning programs. I worked from my basement apartment while the family slept, while the boys were at school, during the quiet hours when no one needed me. I made $180,000 last year. Stephanie thought I lived on my pension and Social Security. She had no idea, and I never told her because somewhere, deep down, I knew that if she found out I had money, she'd find a way to ask for it, and I wouldn't be able to say no. Until I had to. It was a Tuesday evening in early November when Brad cornered me in the kitchen. I was making dinner. I usually cooked for everyone because Stephanie worked late, and Brad was always too busy with his startup. When he sat down at the table with his laptop, "Margaret, I need to talk to you about an opportunity." I noticed he'd stopped calling me Mom about a year ago. It was always Margaret now, said with a tone that made my name sound like an inconvenience. "I'm listening," I said, stirring the pasta sauce. "I've got a chance to invest in a new cryptocurrency that's about to explode. I'm talking life-changing money here, but I need $200,000 to get in at the ground floor. I've already lined up a loan, but I need someone to co-sign." I turned to look at him. Brad was 38, tall and handsome in that generic way that marketing materials favor. He had a smile that had probably charmed many people, including my daughter, but his eyes were flat. Calculating. "Brad, I don't know anything about cryptocurrency," I said carefully. "You don't need to know anything. You just need to sign the paperwork. It's a sure thing, Margaret. In 6 months, we'll triple our money. I'll pay you back your share of the house investment, plus interest. You could move into your own place, live comfortably, never worry about money again." Something about the way he said "move into your own place" made my stomach tighten. "Can I see the information about this investment?" I asked. He waved his hand dismissively. "It's all technical stuff. You wouldn't understand it. Look, I need an answer by Friday. This opportunity isn't going to wait." I spent the next 3 days researching. I might be 65, but I'd been teaching digital literacy to teenagers for 15 years. I knew how to Google. I knew how to spot a scam. The cryptocurrency Brad wanted to invest in was called Quantum Coin. It was being promoted heavily on social media by influencers who'd been paid to shill it. The company behind it had no verifiable team members, no legitimate white paper, no real technology. Every marker screamed pump and dump scheme. Someone was going to make money, but it wasn't going to be the investors. It was going to be the people who created it, who'd cash out and disappear once enough people bought in. On Friday evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Stephanie had actually come home early. The boys were at the table. Brad sat at the head, smiling. "So, Margaret," he said, cutting into his chicken, "did you think about the opportunity I mentioned?" All eyes turned to me. "I did think about it," I said slowly, "and I'm going to decline. I researched Quantum Coin, and I don't think it's a legitimate investment. I think it's a scam." The room went silent. Brad's fork clattered onto his plate. "Excuse me? I'm sorry, Brad, but I can't co-sign a $200,000 loan for something that looks like a fraud. I'd be putting both of us at risk." His face flushed red. "You researched it? You? A retired teacher? And you think you know more than the financial advisors I've been talking to?" "What financial advisors?" I asked quietly. "That's not the point." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "The point is that I'm offering you a chance to be part of something big, and you're too scared and too stupid to take it." "Brad!" Stephanie's voice was sharp, but she was looking at me, not him. "I'm sorry," I said again. "But my answer is no." Brad pointed at me, his hand shaking with rage. "You know what? You've been living here for 3 years, rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities, and you can't do this one thing for your family?" "I'm not living rent-free," I said, my voice still calm even though my heart was pounding. "I contributed $150,000 to the down payment, and I pay the electric bill and the internet." "That was years ago," Brad shouted. "And the electric bill? Big deal! Do you know how much it costs to support you? To have you here, taking up space, getting in the way?" Mason and Tyler were watching with wide eyes. No one told them to leave the table. No one protected them from this scene. "Mom," Stephanie said, and her voice was cold. "Brad has a point. You do live here in our house. We've been generous letting you stay in the basement. Maybe it's time we formalize the arrangement." My daughter. My Stephanie. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid, whose wedding I'd funded. She was looking at me like I was a tenant who'd overstayed their welcome. "What do you mean, formalized?" I asked. Brad sat back down, and suddenly he was smiling. He pulled out a piece of paper from his folder. "We've drafted a lease agreement. You'll pay $2,000 per month for the basement apartment. Fair market rate for Portland. And since you've been living here for 3 years without paying rent, you owe us $72,000 in back rent." I stared at the paper. The words blurred. "Of course," Stephanie added, her voice softening slightly, "if you co-sign the loan for Brad, we can waive the back rent. Family helps family, Mom." I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had she become this person? Or had she always been this person, and I just refused to see it? "I need time to think about this," I said. "You have until Christmas Eve," Brad said. "Either pay the $72,000, sign the loan papers, or find another place to live. I hear there are some nice nursing homes in the area. I'm sure your Social Security would cover it." The boys giggled. Stephanie didn't correct them. I went down to my basement apartment and closed the door. I didn't cry. I was surprised by that. I thought I would cry, but instead I felt something else. Something cold and sharp and clarifying. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started making calls. First, I called my lawyer, the same one who'd helped me document my investment in the house 3 years ago. "I need to know my options," I told her. Her name was Susan Chen. No relation, but we'd bonded over the coincidence when I first hired her. She listened as I explained the situation. "Margaret," she said slowly, "you own 23% of that house's equity. Based on current Portland real estate values, that house is probably worth around $750,000 now. Your share would be roughly $172,000, minus your portion of the remaining mortgage." "Can they force me to leave?" I asked. "Not without buying you out or selling the house. You're a legal part owner. If they want you gone, they need to either pay you your equity or put the house on the market and split the proceeds." I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, exactly. Something harder. Something more like power. "What if I want to force a sale?" I asked. There was a pause. "You could file a partition action. It would force the sale of the property, and everyone would get their share. It's usually messy and expensive, but it's an option. Why? Are you considering it?" "Maybe," I said. "Can we meet? Soon? How about tomorrow morning?" I spent the next 3 weeks quietly preparing. I went through every document I had. I gathered bank statements showing my payment of the electric bill, the internet, the groceries I bought for everyone. I compiled emails and text messages where Stephanie had asked me to babysit every single day for 3 years, where she'd thanked me for helping out by paying for the boys' school supplies, their winter coats, their birthday parties. I documented everything. I also did something else. I called the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center and reported Quantum Coin. I provided all my research, all the evidence of the scam. I didn't know if anything would come of it, but I wanted it on record. And I looked at apartments. Nice ones. 1-bedroom places in safe neighborhoods with good coffee shops nearby. I scheduled viewings. I ran the numbers. I could afford a $1,500 per month rent easily on my consulting income, even without touching my savings. During those 3 weeks, life at the house continued. Stephanie and Brad acted like nothing had happened. They didn't bring up the lease agreement. They didn't mention Christmas Eve. They were pleasant at dinner, asking me to pass the salt, commenting on the weather. The boys, though. The boys had changed. They started calling me Grandma Margaret in a mocking tone. When I asked them to do their homework, they said, "Why should we listen to you? You don't even pay rent." I knew Brad and Stephanie had told them things, poisoned the well. I babysat them anyway. I made them snacks. I helped with their homework. Not because they deserved it, but because they were children, and I was still the adult. And maybe, a small part of me hoped they'd remember, someday, that their grandmother loved them even when their parents taught them not to love her back. On December 20th, Susan called me. "I've prepared everything. If you want to move forward with the partition action, I can file it the day after Christmas. It'll be a shock to them. Obviously, they'll be forced to either buy you out immediately or sell. Given their financial situation, I'm guessing they can't buy you out." "How long would a forced sale take?" I asked. "In this market, the house could sell within a month." "But here's the thing, Margaret. A forced sale right after the holidays, when everyone's broke and not house shopping? It'll probably go for less than market value. They'll lose money. You'll lose money." "I'm okay with that," I said. "There's another option," Susan continued. "What if you offer to sell them your share at a discount? Give them a chance to keep the house if they can come up with, say, $150,000 to buy you out? It's less than your equity is worth, but it's something, and it gives them an option." I thought about it. "Let's prepare both, the partition action and the buyout offer. I'll decide which one to use based on how they treat me on Christmas Eve." "You're giving them one last chance," Susan said. "I'm giving them a choice," I corrected. "Whether they think of it as a chance is up to them." Christmas Eve arrived cold and gray, typical Portland winter weather. I'd spent the morning packing my essential belongings. Not everything. I didn't want them to know I was planning to leave. Just the things that mattered. Photos of David. My grandmother's ring. My favorite books. I had suitcases ready in my car, parked on the street. I'd also found an apartment. A lovely one-bedroom in the Pearl District with huge windows and a small balcony. I'd paid the deposit and first month's rent. The lease started January 1st. I had somewhere to go. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on my basement door. "Mom?" Stephanie's voice. "Can you come upstairs? We need to talk." I climbed the stairs. The whole family was in the living room. Brad sat in the armchair like a king on a throne. Stephanie stood beside him. The boys were on the couch, eating candy canes and watching me with curious eyes. "Margaret," Brad said, not bothering with pleasantries. "It's Christmas Eve. Time's up. What's your decision?" I sat down on the remaining chair. I folded my hands in my lap. "I've made my decision," I said calmly. "I'm not going to co-sign your loan, and I'm not going to pay $72,000 in back rent for a space I partly own." Brad's face darkened. "Then you need to leave. Tonight." "Brad, it's Christmas Eve," Stephanie said, but her voice was weak, performative. "I don't care," Brad said. "She made her choice. She can go to a hotel, or maybe one of those women's shelters takes old people." The boys giggled again. "I'll leave," I said quietly, "but I need something from you first." "You need something?" Brad laughed. "That's rich. You're the one being kicked out. I need you to sign paperwork acknowledging that I'm voluntarily leaving and that we're settling all financial obligations between us." "Fine," Brad said, standing up. "Where do I sign?" "My lawyer will bring the papers tomorrow morning," I said. "Christmas Day. Then I'll be gone." Stephanie frowned. "A lawyer? Mom, is that really necessary?" I looked at my daughter. I tried to find the little girl in her face, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. She was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for a long time. "Yes," I said simply. "It's necessary." I went back downstairs and didn't come up again that night. Christmas morning, Susan arrived at 10 a.m. I'd already loaded the last of my belongings into my car. I'd left the basement clean and empty except for the furniture that came with it. I brought Susan upstairs. Stephanie and Brad were drinking coffee in the kitchen, still in their pajamas. The boys were in the living room, tearing through presents. "This is my lawyer, Susan Chen," I said. "She's prepared the paperwork." Brad took the papers and started skimming them. His expression changed from annoyed to confused to panicked in about 30 seconds. "What the hell is this?" he said. This says you're forcing a sale of the house? That's one option, Susan said calmly. It's called a partition action. Mrs. Chen Rodriguez owns 23% of this property's equity. If she wants to liquidate her investment and you can't buy her out, the house will be sold and the proceeds divided. Stephanie grabbed the papers from Brad's hands. Her face went pale. Mom, you can't be serious. There's another option on page 3, I said. My voice was steady, calm. After all those years teaching teenagers, I knew how to project authority. You can buy me out. 15 million. That's less than my equity is actually worth, but I'm willing to take the loss to settle this quickly. $150,000? Brad shouted. We don't have $150,000. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? I don't know, I said simply. But those are your options. Buy me out, or the house gets sold. Susan will give you until January 15th to decide. After that, she files the partition action, and it's out of your hands. You can't do this. Stephanie's voice was shrill now. This is our home. The boys' home. Where are we supposed to go? I felt something crack inside my chest, but I kept my face neutral. I don't know, Stephanie. Maybe you'll have to move into someone's basement and hope they're kinder to you than you were to me. We gave you a place to live. Brad was red-faced, veins bulging in his neck. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. I paid $150,000 for the privilege, I said, and I gave you 3 years of free childcare, utilities, groceries, and whatever else you needed. I think we're even. Susan handed them another document. This outlines Mrs. Chen Rodriguez's contributions to the household over the past 3 years. Childcare at the going rate for Portland would have been approximately $45,000 per year. Add in utilities and groceries, and you actually owe her money. I hadn't asked Susan to include that, but I was glad she had. Stephanie started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind I'd seen her use on Brad when she wanted a new handbag. Mom, please, we can work this out. We were just stressed. We didn't mean those things. You told me to leave, I said quietly. You set a deadline. Christmas Eve. Well, it's past Christmas Eve, and I'm leaving. The only question now is whether you keep your house or not. Brad looked at Susan. This is blackmail. No, Susan said. This is property law. Missus. Chen Rodriguez has every legal right to her equity. She's actually being generous by offering you the chance to buy her out at below market value. We'll sue you, Brad said wildly. We'll claim elder abuse or something. You manipulated us. Susan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Mr. Holloway, I would be very careful about throwing around accusations like that. Mrs. Chen Rodriguez has documented everything, including your attempted fraud. What fraud? His voice went up an octave. The quantum coin investment you tried to coerce her into co-signing for. The FBI has been investigating that particular cryptocurrency scam for 3 months now. Several arrests are imminent. If Mrs. Chen Rodriguez had co-signed that loan, you both would be liable for $200,000 in debt for a worthless asset. She actually protected you by refusing. I hadn't known about the arrests being imminent. Susan must have followed up on my FBI report. But I watched Brad's face go gray, and I felt nothing. Stephanie looked between me and Susan. Mom, I don't understand. How do you even have a lawyer? How are you paying for this? I'm a consultant, I said simply. I work for 3 tech companies teaching leadership and communication. I make about $180,000 a year. I've been doing it for 5 years. The silence was absolute. You have that kind of money? Stephanie whispered. And you let us think you were poor? You never asked, I said. You made assumptions. You treated me like a burden because you thought I was one. Now you know I wasn't. I stood up. Susan stood with me. You have until January 15th, I said. Merry Christmas. I walked out the door. I spent Christmas Day in my new apartment, unpacking boxes and watching the rain slide down the windows. I ordered Chinese food and ate it alone, sitting on my new couch, watching an old movie on my laptop. It should have been sad. It probably was sad. But mostly, I felt light. On December 28th, Stephanie called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mom? Her voice was small. Scared. Can we talk? In person? We met at a coffee shop in Hawthorne, neutral ground. She arrived looking like she hadn't slept, her eyes red and puffy. "Brad left," she said as soon as she sat down. "He's staying with a friend. He said this is my fault, that I should have controlled you better." I said nothing. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. Brad was so stressed about money, and the business wasn't working, and I let him treat you that way. I treated you that way. I was awful." "Yes," I agreed. "You were." She flinched. "The boys miss you. They've been crying. They don't understand why Grandma left." "You told them I didn't pay rent," I said. "You taught them to disrespect me." "I know." She was crying now. "I know I did, and I'm so sorry. Is there any way? Can we fix this? Can I fix this?" I looked at my daughter. She was 35 years old, but right now she looked like a child, lost and scared and desperate for her mother. "I don't know," I said honestly. "The trust is broken, Stephanie. You sided with your husband when he verbally abused me. You let your children mock me. You threatened to put me in a nursing home. Those aren't things I can just forget." "I'll do anything," she said. "Therapy, family counseling, whatever it takes. Just please don't take our house." "That's not my decision anymore," I said. "That's your decision. You need to figure out how to come up with $150,000, or you need to prepare to sell. Those are your options." "We can't get that kind of money," she whispered. "Even if we sold everything we own." "Then I guess you'll be learning what it's like to start over," I said. "Like I had to when your father died. Like I had to when you kicked me out." She sobbed harder. I felt bad, but I also felt something else. Something like boundaries, like self-respect. "Mom, please." "The boys. Where will we go?" "I don't know, Stephanie, but you'll figure it out. You're smart and capable. You just got lazy, relying on me to subsidize your lifestyle." I stood up to leave. "Mom, wait," she grabbed my hand. "Just tell me, is there any chance we can have a relationship again, after all this?" I looked down at her. "Maybe," I said, "but not until you understand why what you did was wrong. Not just sorry because you got caught, or because there are consequences. Actually understanding that I'm a person who deserves respect, not a resource to be exploited." "I do understand," she said desperately. "I don't think you do." "Not yet." I left the coffee shop. On January 10th, Susan called. They found a solution. "What kind of solution?" "Stephanie's parents are lending them the money." I was confused. "I'm Stephanie's parent." "No, I mean Brad's parents. Apparently they're quite wealthy. They've agreed to lend Stephanie and Brad the $150,000 to buy you out, with the condition that Brad moves out permanently and they divorce." Turns out Brad's parents never liked him much either. They see this as an opportunity to help their daughter-in-law and grandsons while getting their son away from them. I didn't know what to say. "They're also insisting Stephanie and the boys do family therapy," Susan continued. "It's part of the loan agreement. Brad's mother apparently told him that if he ever contacts Stephanie or the boys again, she'll cut him off entirely." "Wow," I said. "So, do you accept? They'll have the money transferred to you by January 14th. I thought about it. Stephanie would keep her house, the boys would stay in their school, and I'd have $150,000 to add to my savings, free and clear of any obligation." "Yes," I said, "I accept." It's February now. I've been in my apartment for 5 weeks. I love it here. I have a view of the city lights. I have my own space, decorated exactly how I want it. I work from my dining table, teaching executives how to write emails that people will actually read, how to give presentations that don't bore people to tears, how to think clearly and communicate effectively. I make more money than I ever did as a teacher. I have more freedom. I have peace. Stephanie texts me sometimes. Small things. The boys got A's on their math tests. We started therapy. It's hard but helpful. I'm sorry. I know I keep saying it, but I am. I respond sometimes. Brief, polite messages. That's wonderful about their grades. Therapy takes time. I know. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship we once had. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But I know this. I will never again let anyone make me feel small or worthless or like a burden. Last week, Mason sent me a drawing. It was a picture of a house with a stick figure labeled Grandma standing outside, and two smaller stick figures in the windows, waving. At the bottom, in his messy 8-year-old handwriting, he wrote, "We miss you. I'm sorry we were mean." I cried when I saw it. I'm not made of stone. I put it on my refrigerator. Maybe someday I'll babysit them again. Maybe someday we'll bake cookies together and I'll help with homework and they'll tell me about their days. Maybe, but it will be on my terms. When I'm ready. If I'm ready. For now, I'm sitting in my sunny apartment, drinking coffee, about to start a video call with a VP who needs help with her company's training program. After that, I'll go to the bookstore. Maybe I'll treat myself to dinner at that Thai place I've been wanting to try. I'll come home to my quiet, peaceful space where no one demands anything of me, where no one makes me feel lesser than, where I am enough exactly as I am. They thought I was weak because I was old. They thought I was helpless because I was alone. They thought I had no options because I was a retired teacher living in their basement. They thought I needed them. Turns out, they needed me. They just didn't realize it until I was gone. I learned something through all of this. Something I wish I'd known earlier, but I know now. You can't make people value you. You can't make them respect you. All you can do is value and respect yourself enough to walk away when they don't. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. I smiled as I signed those papers. Not because I wanted to hurt my daughter. Not because I wanted revenge. I smiled because for the first time in 3 years, I was choosing myself. And that choice set me free.